She wasn't serious. I know that now. But at the time, standing in her driveway with grease on my hands and my daughter tugging at my sleeve, I had no idea what I'd just agreed to walk into. It started on a Tuesday, which matters because Tuesdays are my hardest day. I pick up Lily from school at 3, get her home by 3:30, make sure she has a snack and starts her homework, and then I'm back in the truck by 4 because I've usually got a late job somewhere. I run a small restoration business out of my garage. Antique furniture, mostly. Dining tables, armoires, old rocking chairs that people's grandmothers left behind. I'm not famous for it. I don't have a storefront. I have a website my neighbor's kid built me in 2019 and a reputation that travels mostly by word of mouth through a particular kind of person. The kind who still believes that something broken is worth fixing. That Tuesday, a woman named Audrey Sinclair called me. I almost didn't answer. I was pulling out of the school parking lot, and Lily was already talking about something that happened at recess, something involving a disagreement over a handball rule, and I had one hand on the wheel and half my attention on her. But the number had a 312 area code, Chicago, and I had a piece out with a dealer up there who owed me a callback, so I answered. The voice on the other end was not the dealer. "Is this the furniture restoration man?" she said. Not rude, just efficient. The way people talk when they've spent years having their time treated like something valuable. I told her yes, that was me, and she said someone had given her my number. She couldn't remember who, which I believed because people like her collect referrals like receipts and rarely track where they came from. She had a piece. A secretary desk, she said. 19th century, she believed, maybe earlier. It had been in her family for a long time. It was damaged. She wanted someone to look at it. I asked her where she was located. She gave me an address in Kenilworth. I knew the neighborhood, everyone does. Old money and lake views and houses that don't have for sale signs because the sales happened before any sign could go up. I'd done 2 jobs up there before, both referrals. Both people who were polite in the specific way that means they're never going to remember your name, but will recommend you warmly to everyone they know. I told her I could come Saturday morning, and she said that was fine. And that was the end of it. I didn't think much about Audrey Sinclair for the rest of that week. I had 3 other jobs in progress. A shaker-style side table with a cracked apron, a Victorian settee someone had badly reupholstered in the wrong decade, and a Welsh dresser that had been painted over so many times I'd spent 2 days just stripping it. Lily had a science project due Friday. I made spaghetti twice because she asked me to, and because it's the one thing I reliably don't burn. Thursday night, after she was in bed, I looked up the address. I don't know why I did it. Professional habit, maybe, or something else. But I typed the street number into the browser, and what came up first wasn't a map. It was a real estate listing, a past one, from about 4 years prior. The property had sold for a number that I had to read twice. It had 6 bedrooms, a carriage house, and a private stretch of shoreline. The main house was described as a restored Georgian revival. I closed the browser. I showed up Saturday at 9. The gate at the end of the drive was wrought iron and unmanned, but there was a keypad with an intercom, and when I pressed the button, a woman's voice, not the same one from the phone, told me to pull through and park to the left of the fountain. There was a fountain. I parked to the left of it in my truck, which has a dent above the rear wheel well that I've been meaning to fix for 2 years, and I sat there for a moment longer than I needed to. Then I got out and rang the front doorbell. Audrey Sinclair answered it herself. I don't know what I'd expected. Someone older, maybe. Someone who looked more like the house. But she was somewhere around 40, dark hair pulled back in a way that looked casual but probably wasn't, wearing a pale gray sweater and dark pants, and the kind of small earrings that don't call attention to themselves. She looked at me the way people look at a repairman. Professional assessment, brief, not unkind, and then she opened the door wider and said, "Come in, it's in the study." The house was everything the listing had promised. Wide plank floors, high ceilings, art on the walls that didn't feel decorative so much as considered. She walked quickly and I followed, and we didn't talk about anything except the desk. It was in the study at the back of the house, a room lined with bookshelves and facing the lake. And the desk, even from across the room, I could see why she'd called someone. It was a cylinder roll secretary, late Federal period, probably 1810 to 1820, cherry with satinwood inlay. One of the interior drawers had been forced at some point, splitting the dovetail. The cylinder itself had warped slightly, enough that it no longer sat flush. The feet, turned, original, had been repaired at some point by someone who'd used the wrong adhesive, and two of them were pulling loose. There was a watermark on the writing surface, old but visible, and a long crack in the left side panel that someone had filled with the wrong color putty. I stood in front of it for a long time without speaking. "Is it bad?" she said. "It's fixable," I said. "All of it. But some of it's going to take a while." She nodded. She wasn't the kind of person who asked follow-up questions out of anxiety. She waited. I crouched down to look at the feet, then straightened up and looked at the interior. There was still paper in one of the pigeonholes. Old paper, folded in thirds the way people used to fold letters before envelopes. I didn't touch it. "How long has this been in your family?" I asked. She was quiet for a moment. "It came from my grandmother on my father's side." Another pause. "She died when I was 11. I was the one who asked for it, at the estate sale. My father thought I was too young to want something like that." She said it without sentiment, just as information. I was right, though. I knew even then that it mattered. I looked at her briefly. Then I looked back at the desk. "There's something I want to show you," I said. I asked her if she had a flashlight. She went and got one, a good one, not a phone, an actual flashlight which told me something, and I used it to angle light into the back interior behind the small central door that most people overlook. There was a maker's mark, stamped into the wood, partially obscured by age and the residue of old shellac, but legible if you knew what you were looking for. A set of initials and a city, THW, Baltimore. I heard her inhale. "You know what that is," I said. "My grandmother mentioned it once." Her voice was careful. "She said it was made by someone important. I never knew if that was true or if she was just." She stopped. "It's true," I said. "THW is Thomas Henry Whitfield. He was a Baltimore cabinet maker, Federal period. He trained under someone who trained under someone who worked with Hepplewhite's published designs. There are fewer than 40 confirmed pieces attributed to him. The Metropolitan has 2, the Winterthur has 1. I paused. "I've only ever seen one in private hands before." The room was very quiet. "Until now," I said. She looked at the desk, not at me. She looked at it the way you look at something when you're suddenly seeing it differently than you ever have before. Like the object itself has changed. Even though it hasn't. Even though it's been sitting in that room the same as always, and you're the one who changed. I gave her a minute. Then I told her the truth about the repairs. I told her what had been done wrong and when, roughly, based on the materials. The incorrect adhesive on the feet was a 1970s product, probably a well-meaning intervention by someone who didn't know better. The putty in the crack was newer, maybe 15 years old, same story. The forced drawer was older, probably mid-century, and had partially destabilized the interior structure in a way that would need to be addressed carefully. The watermark I could minimize but not erase. "Can you work on it here?" she asked. "I don't want it moved." I told her I could do most of it on site, that I'd need to take the drawer mechanism off-site for part of the repair, but that I'd bring it back within a week. She nodded again. Then she did something I wasn't expecting. She smiled. Not the polite, brief kind she'd offered at the door, but something more genuine, and said, "My grandmother used to say that the best thing you could do for something old was find someone who understood why it still mattered." I didn't say anything to that. I should say here that I'm not a sentimental person by nature. I became a father before I became a lot of other things, and being a father will rearrange your sentimentality in ways that aren't always obvious. I cry at certain things Lily says sometimes. I don't cry at furniture. But there was something about standing in that room, with that desk, with the light coming off the lake through the window, and hearing her say that. I felt it somewhere in my chest in a way I hadn't expected. I drove home and I didn't think about Audrey Sinclair. I thought about the desk. I came back Monday, and Wednesday, and the following Monday. I brought my tools in a canvas bag that I've had for 15 years, and I worked in the study with the door open so the fumes could air out, and she was mostly elsewhere in the house during the hours I was there. Sometimes I'd hear her on a call in another room, her voice low and even, the cadence of someone making decisions. Once I heard a door close firmly. Once I heard her laugh at something, a real laugh, surprised and brief. Lily asked me once where I was going. I told her I was working on a desk that belonged to a very old house. She asked if the house was haunted, and I said no. She asked if I was sure, and I said mostly. She seemed satisfied. The third visit, Audrey came into the study with 2 mugs of coffee and set one on the far corner of the work table I'd set up away from the piece. She didn't make conversation about it. She just left it there and went back to wherever she'd come from. I drank it. It was good coffee, the kind that costs something, but not in a way that's showing off, just in a way that says someone pays attention. The fourth visit, she stayed. She sat in the chair by the window with a book open in her lap, but she wasn't reading it. She watched me work. I don't mind being watched. Some restorers do, but I've always found it easier to work with an audience than to explain what I did afterward. After about 20 minutes, she asked me how I'd gotten into this. I told her about my grandfather, his shop in Racine, Wisconsin, the way he smelled like linseed oil and sawdust even on Sundays, the way he talked to furniture like it was people. Not crazy talk, just the habit of someone who'd spent 60 years taking things seriously. I worked with him every summer from the time I was 9 until the summer I was 17, when he died. After that, I went through the usual years of not knowing what to do, a couple of years of community college, a job in a cabinet shop that wasn't good enough for either of us. Then I started doing restoration work on the side. Then the side became the thing. She listened without interrupting, which is rarer than it sounds. "You have a daughter," she said when I finished. I hadn't mentioned Lily. "How did you know?" "You have a drawing in your shirt pocket," she said. "It's been there every time you've come." I looked down. Lily had given me a drawing that morning of what she described as a horse, but that looked more like a dog with an ambitious mane. I'd put it in my pocket without thinking about it the way I always do. "Lily," I said. "She's 8. Just you two? Just us two?" She looked back at the window. The lake was flat that day, the color of old pewter. "I have a son," she said. "He's 12. He lives with me half the time." She paused. "The other half I'm not sure what I'd do with myself." I didn't respond to that, because it wasn't the kind of thing that needed a response. I finished the primary structural repairs on the 5th visit. I'd already resolved the feet, cleaned off the old adhesive, re-glued with the correct period-appropriate hide glue, clamped and let cure for 48 hours. The drawer I'd taken and brought back, the dovetail recut and refitted so cleanly that you'd have to know where to look. I was working now on the cylinder itself, careful humidification to ease the warp without stressing the veneer, a process that takes patience more than skill. She came in with coffee again, and this time she sat and we talked for almost an hour while I worked. She asked about the Whitfield. I told her what I knew of his biography. Born 1771, trained as an apprentice at 14, set up his own shop by 1798, died 1834, probably of fever. She asked what happened to his other pieces. I said some were in museums, some were in private collections, and some were certainly still in houses like this one, sitting in studies or attics being used as surfaces for putting mail on, their importance unrecognized. "Like mine was," she said. "Like yours was," I said. "Until you knew." She was quiet for a moment. "I think that's why my grandmother left it to me specifically," she said. "Not because I was her favorite, though she might have been, because she knew I was the kind of person who would want to know." I straightened up from the desk and looked at her. "You are," I said. I don't know why I said it. It just came out. True things sometimes do that. She looked at me for a moment, and then she looked away. And there was something in the room that I didn't try to name, because naming things too quickly is how you get them wrong. I went home and I made grilled cheese and tomato soup, and Lily told me about a book she was reading, about a girl who discovers her family is secretly descended from lighthouse keepers, and I listened to every word. And later, after she was in bed, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time without doing anything. On the 6th visit, I came to do the finishing work, the final touch-up on the watermark, a careful application of shellac to blend the repaired areas back into the surrounding surface, a light waxing of the whole piece to unify the patina. It's the kind of work you can't rush, and I'd been looking forward to it in the way I always look forward to the last stage of a restoration. The piece becoming itself again. Audrey met me at the door differently that morning. Not unusual, just present. Like she'd been waiting, though she'd never in our previous meetings given any impression of waiting. She'd been going through some things in her grandmother's estate, she told me, things that had been in storage. She'd found letters. Her grandmother's correspondence, mostly, from the 1950s and 60s. But there was one letter she wanted to show me, because it mentioned the desk. The letter was from 1962, written by her grandmother to a cousin in Philadelphia. In it, she mentioned that she'd had the secretary appraised. The appraiser had told her it was a reproduction, a high-quality one, but not original, worth perhaps a few $100s as a decorative piece. Her grandmother had written, "I don't care what he says. I know it's real. I know because I can feel it." Audrey held the letter out to me. I read it twice. "She was right," I said. "I know. She sat with something that an expert told her was worthless, and she held on to it for 60 more years because she trusted what she knew." Audrey folded the letter carefully. "And then you came in and looked behind the little door." I finished the work that afternoon. The desk was extraordinary. I'd known it intellectually from the first visit, but standing back and looking at it after the restoration, the cylinder sitting flush and true, the feet solid and even, the surfaces clean and unified, the drawer sliding in and out with the slight resistance that good craftsmanship produces. It was something else. She stood next to me looking at it. "What does a piece like this go for?" she asked. "If someone were to sell it." I told her a range. It was a significant range. The kind of number that changes things. She was quiet for a while. "I'm not going to sell it," she said. "I just wanted to know if my grandmother's instinct was worth something." "It was worth exactly that," I said, "and considerably more, I'd argue." She smiled. It was the same smile as the first time, the real one. Then she said, "And I want to be careful here about how I describe the way she said it, because the tone matters." She said it lightly, the way you say something when you're not sure if you mean it or not. "You know, if I'd known someone was going to come in here and make all of this make sense, I might have called you a long time ago." I looked at her. She was looking at the desk. I picked up my bag. I checked that I hadn't left any tools behind. I thanked her for the coffee, all 6 times of it. She walked me to the door. The lake was visible from the front step, just a flat line of gray-blue beyond the trees. "Will you come back?" she said. "If I find something else, that's what I do," I said. I drove back through Kenilworth and got onto the expressway and sat in traffic for 25 minutes, which is usually the kind of thing that bothers me. It didn't bother me that afternoon. I picked Lily up from her after-school program at 5. She showed me a painting she'd made in art. She'd used every color available, which she sometimes does when she's in a particular mood. She told me the painting was of the ocean, even though she'd never seen it. She just thought it would look like that. I told her she was probably right. I put the painting on the refrigerator when we got home, next to the horse dog drawing, and I stood there for a moment looking at both of them. Lily came and stood next to me. "What are you thinking about, Dad?" "About how some things take a long time to make sense," I said. She thought about this with the seriousness that 8-year-olds apply to things that feel important. "Like math?" she said. "A little bit like math," I said. She seemed satisfied and went to get her backpack. I stood there a moment longer. Outside the kitchen window, it was getting dark the way it does in late October, fast and quiet, without much ceremony. I wasn't thinking about the desk, not exactly. I was thinking about a woman who trusted what she knew when an expert told her she was wrong. And a grandmother who held on to something for 60 years because she could feel that it mattered. And I was thinking that sometimes the right instinct, held long enough, turns out to be exactly right. I'm still thinking about it.